Hey everybody, good morning. This is Jen here with P40ministries.com. I hope you are continuing to be patient with me as I try to figure out this whole podcasting thing. I do not have my system fully set up yet to do the podcasting microphone. It is set up, but it's not quite there yet to give you guys that great sounding quality that I'm hoping for. I still have a few things that I'm trying to figure out, but I'm getting the ball rolling and it will be there soon, I promise. So continue to be patient with me as I figure that out and still use my cruddy old system that I am currently using right now. And I hope that it's not too much white noise for you guys, because I get it. White noise is super, super distracting to me. But I am going to be reading out of Genesis chapter 12 today, verses 1 through 9. And this is actually the start of Abram's story today. So we finally finished everything about Noah and the Tower of Babel. And now we are basically on a brand new arc of the Bible, which is Abram's story. And Abram is the start of the Jewish nation, and he is a descendant of Shem's, which we learned about on Friday. And his story is extremely important to the Bible because he is the start of the Jewish nation. And even now, to the Jewish community, he is considered a patriarch. And this is a very important portion of Scripture that we're going to learn about. So let's start reading Genesis chapter 12, verses 1 through 9. And today I'm actually going to be reading out of the NIV version of the Bible. The Lord had said to Abram, "Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all the peoples on earth will be blessed through you." So Abram went as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he set out from Haran. He took his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, and all the possessions they had accumulated and the people they had acquired in Haran, and they set out for the land of Canaan, and they arrived there. Abram traveled through the land, as far as the site of the great tree of Morah at Shechem. At that time, the Canaanites were in the land. The Lord appeared to Abram and said, "To your offspring I will give this land." So he built an altar there to the Lord who had appeared to him. From there he went on towards the hills, east of Bethel, and pitched his tent, with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. There he built an altar to the Lord and called on the name of the Lord. Then Abram set out and continued toward Negev. So Abram here is just an ordinary man. And God calls on him and says, "Leave your father's household, leave everything that you know, and go in faith towards the land I tell you to go to, because I am going to expand your territory." And he basically says to him, God says to Abram, "I am going to make you into a great nation." And actually, it says in verse 2, "I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you." And he says to him, "I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing." And this is very true. You know, God says this to Abram, and it's very true. We still hear about Abraham or Abram to this day. And his name is indeed great, and he is blessed because he is the father of the Jewish people. So then God says in verse 3, "I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all the peoples on the earth will be blessed through you." And I believe that God is saying that to Abram is because he gave the law to the Jewish people. And the law was something that was used to bless the nations. It was for everybody. Yes, it was for the Jewish people. God gave it to the Jewish people. But there was a portion in the law that says if any foreigner that is living among you wants to follow the law, they can do that and they can become a part of their community. So this was for everybody to follow. And yes, like I said, God did give it to the Jewish people because he had blessed Abraham and blessed Abraham's descendants. But other people were blessed through Abraham's descendants because of the law. So my question is, why did God choose Abram? Out of all the people in the earth that he could have chosen, why do you think he chose Abram? Well, first off, he was of the bloodline of Seth, which we covered. And Seth was of the bloodline of Noah. And Noah was one of the few people at his time who did not have any Nephilim in him. And yes, I am going back to the Nephilim again. It is so funny how often I'm going back to them. But anyway, there was no fallen angel or Nephilim in Noah's bloodline, as well as with Seth's bloodline. So Abraham was of a pure bloodline all the way from the time of Adam. And Abram was the ancestor of Jesus Christ. And I believe that the Father had this plan in place, even from this point, even before this point, to the birth of Jesus Christ. And this was the avenue that the Father was taking, using Abram and his bloodline to build a people that would someday produce Jesus Christ. Because, like I said, Abram had the clean bloodline with no Nephilim in him at this point, or at any point, actually. And the Father, I think, had this plan in place from the very beginning, to use his Son, Jesus Christ, to come to the earth, to save the sins of everyone. And Abram was the one who was going to eventually produce Jesus Christ, Abram's bloodline. So I believe that's one of the reasons why God chose Abram. But not only that, I also think that Abram was probably one of the few people at the time who had faith and who believed in God. So once again, you remember that humanity continues to digress with all the stories I've even said since the flood happened, like with Ham and his father. And Abram, it's very possible, was one of the few people, again, who was faithful and loved the Lord. And we can actually read about Abram's faith in James 2, verses 22 and 23. James is in the New Testament, and he is talking about Abraham, or Abram, in these verses. You see that his faith, or Abram's, and his actions were working together, and his faith was made complete by what he did. And the scripture was fulfilled that says, Abraham believed God, and it was credited to him as righteousness, and he was called God's friend. So Abram believed in God, and thus he was a righteous person. So he believed that God had this great plan for him. He trusted in God. And he ended up leaving everything behind because he had lived with his father. I did mention that. He had lived with his father up until this point. And he just ups and leaves. Imagine leaving the comfort of your home because God comes to you and says, go to this land that I tell you to go to and become a stranger there and live among those people, and I will bless you because of it. I know that would be really hard. You know, you don't speak the language, you're not familiar, it's not comfortable. And, you know, a lot of people, and I'm going to call this out, a lot of people say that they're scared to give their all to God, and I am too. They're scared to give their all to God, but they're afraid of that because they think God is going to make them a missionary to Africa or something. I have heard that so many times. But that is basically what Abram did. He gave his all to God, and he trusted that God had the best plan for him, and he left the comfort of his father's home. And this was probably not easy, because it says here that he arrived in the land of Canaan. And we know from talking about the bloodlines that the Canaanites were evil people from Ham's bloodline. And also very possibly, again, they were from the Nephilim bloodline, because I had talked about that a few episodes back. So Abram goes and lives among these Canaanites, and he travels there. And God says to Abram, I am going to give you this land to your offspring. So God is essentially saying to Abram, I'm going to take this land from the Canaanites and I'm going to give it to your children someday. And that's my paraphrase. But Abraham builds an altar to the Lord out of faith and out of trust that he knew that God had the right plan for him. Even though it might have been scary to leave the comfort of his home and his family and travel to an unknown land as a stranger and live there, but out of faith he makes this altar to the Lord and he calls upon the name of the Lord. And then he pitches his tent and he starts living there it says, with Bethel on the west, and then in verse 8 it says, Ai on the east. So that is the start of Abram's story in the Bible in Genesis chapter 12. And I really love Abrams and Sarai's stories. And obviously their names are not going to be Abram and Sarai forever. Everybody knows them as Abraham and Sarah. But I love their story because it's a story of forgiveness and redemption, basically constantly. Because these people were considered faithful individuals, but they made so many mistakes. But they're a picture of God's forgiveness and love over and over and over. And the redemption story that God used through these two people to produce Jesus Christ. And it's just an amazing story, for real. I really do enjoy the story of Abram and Sarai. But I hope you join me again tomorrow at 6:30 a.m. for another episode out of Matthew chapter 5. And hopefully we're going to be finishing up Matthew at this point and moving on to Matthew chapter 6 on Thursday. So join me then. I hope that you remain patient with me, like I said at the beginning with the podcasting microphone. But I'm serious, guys. The podcasting microphone, when I'm using it, it sounds so clear and so good, and I can hear myself super well. And I hope that you guys stay tuned for that, of course. But I am so thankful for all of you. I am thankful that you are continuing to listen and hopefully gain something from this podcast. And, you know, I wouldn't have been able to get this equipment without you guys and without having regular listeners. So I'm so thankful for you guys. Thank you so much. But join me tomorrow for another podcast episode. But until then, happy listening and God bless.